2007, Transformers exploded onto the big screen in a way few blockbusters ever have. It was loud, chaotic, divisive, yet somehow instantly iconic. Michael Bay took a line of plastic robot toys and turned them into a modern myth. Over time, it became one of the most commercially successful film franchises of the 21st century, and one of the most mocked. But these movies were unmistakably Bay's. They pulsed with a very specific energy and personality, a maximalist vision of American cinema at its most unfiltered. For years, these movies defined blockbuster cinema, and for years they were dismissed as noisy and empty spectacle. Michael Bay became shorthand for cinematic excess, style over substance, noise over meaning. Critics rolled their eyes. Think pieces dismissed it all as a teenage fantasy with a multi-million-dollar budget. But now, something unexpected has happened. Just when we thought the dust had settled, the ground trembled once again. Michael Bay, the architect of modern blockbuster spectacle, is reportedly returning to the Transformers franchise. Not just as a producer, but likely as a director of a new film, years after he handed off the reins of the franchise. And the response? Overwhelmingly positive. Across the internet, fans aren't rolling their eyes, they're celebrating. Why, you may ask? Because for all of the memes and the mockery, Bay's Transformers films left a cultural crater. These movies imprinted themselves on a generation, not just through sound and fury, but through heart, angst, and awe. If Bay does return, this won't just be another sequel. It could be a once-in-a-generation moment. The return of a filmmaker to a franchise he created. Not because the industry demands it, but because we, as an audience, are finally ready to understand it. Audiences are begging for one last ride with the man who started it all. No collective groans, no ironic distance, just a surprising, simple truth. We missed Michael Bay. This is a story about legacy, about closure, about what happens when a director returns, not just to make more noise, but to finish a symphony. Maybe the tide has already turned. Maybe the reappraisal is already happening. If the story of Transformers is really about legacy, then Michael Bay is its author, and the king has returned. Since Michael Bay left, the Transformers franchise has been adrift, searching for itself. Bumblebee was a breath of fresh air, smaller in scope, character-driven, and warmly received by critics, but it failed to break through to mainstream audiences. Despite its charm and extreme sense of heart, it lacked the cultural velocity of Bay's films. It didn't define a moment the way Revenge of the Fallen or Dark of the Moon did. And Rise of the Beast, it tried to chase Bay's scale without his vision. The result was a film that looked like Transformers, sounded like Transformers, but ultimately felt like a cheap imitation. It reached for epic mythology, but fumbled the execution. The alchemy wasn't there. Because here's the truth. Bay's Transformers films weren't successful in spite of their chaos. They were successful because of it. He didn't just direct the action, he orchestrated it masterfully. His camera didn't just capture motion, it danced with it. Every frame was kinetic, every moment was saturated with emotional intensity, even when the story barely felt comprehensible. These films had rhythm, they had scale, and most importantly, they had identity. Without Michael Bay, Transformers is just another IP. With him, it's a cinematic fever dream, part war film, part music video, part mythic opera. And now, with his return on the horizon, the franchise has a rare opportunity to reclaim the vision that made it matter in the first place. When people talk about modern blockbuster filmmaking, they often use one word: safe. Movies made by committee, written by AI, rewritten by 5 other screenwriters, overseen by producers who treat the story like product, not art. In that landscape, Michael Bay is something rare, a director with an actual voice. Love it or hate it, you know a Michael Bay film when you watch it, because he doesn't just direct these movies. He directs them with clarity, skill, and vision. His style is bombastic and aggressive, but there's also a lot of rhythm, flow, and composition to his style. His camera moves like a predator, his edits hit like percussion. Say what you want, but it is absolutely his. So when Michael Bay left Transformers, the franchise didn't just lose its director, it lost its identity. Without him, Transformers became safer and emptier. Michael Bay's return isn't just nostalgia. It might be the last stand of blockbuster auteurs, directors who leave blueprints, who risk failure in pursuit of feeling. And maybe that's why people are excited, because we've had enough quote unquote content. We want cinema. Transformers without Bay is a machine without a spark. And this is the moment the engine might roar back to life. For all of the giant alien robot chaos, the explosions, the military fetishism, Bay's Transformers was always grounded in something deeply human. It was a love story. Sam Witwicky and Mikaela Baines weren't just placeholders in a blockbuster plot. They were a generational lens, a teenage fantasy of love, fear, anxiety, and awkward heroism told at a mythic scale. And somewhere along the way, they were forgotten. Mikaela vanished between sequels, never given a proper send off. Sam was written out with a vague line in Age of Extinction, his absence reduced to a footnote. But to an entire generation, these two characters were more than side plots. They were the emotional core of the franchise. Their chemistry, somehow volatile, playful, and imperfect at the same time, captured something real amid all of the artificial chaos. Sam wasn't a hero because he wanted to be. He was a hero because he was terrified and chose to act in spite of that fear. That ethos, the collision of fear and responsibility, is what gave the early films their heart. And here's where Bay's return becomes more than a creative decision. It becomes an opportunity, a chance to bring these characters back, not as a gimmick, not as nostalgia bait, but as closure. Imagine Sam and Mikaela reunited, older now, wiser, changed by war, by love, by time. Their story interrupted by studio mandates, now finally allowed to conclude on Bay's terms. Their reunion could be messy, bittersweet, hopeful, human. In a cinematic landscape obsessed with multiverses and cameos, this wouldn't be about fan service. It would be about emotional continuity, about honoring characters who once stood at the center of a myth and were never allowed to say goodbye. Because whether critics saw it or not, Sam and Mikaela meant something. They meant something to the kids who grew up with them, to the people who saw themselves in their struggle. These two deserve closure,
and Michael Bay might be the only person who can give it to them. Sam didn't get a proper send off. He got erased. After Dark of the Moon, the boy who saved the world 3 times vanished from the story. No funeral, no final scene. All we get is a new lead and a new timeline. Mikaela didn't even get that much. She was replaced off screen, forgotten, as if her arc, her agency, her very presence never really mattered. But they did matter. Sam and Mikaela were the emotional core of the Transformers trilogy. They weren't perfect, they weren't polished, but they were human. And now, for the first time, maybe they have a chance to finish what they started together. Bringing back Sam and Mikaela isn't just fan service, it's emotional closure, it's cultural closure, it's the end of a story that millions of people still carry with them, even now. So I said this in the original video reconsidering Michael Bay's Transformers. Michael Bay is often caricatured as a director of endless explosions and spinning cameras. But Ambulance offers a very different picture. It's a leaner film, sharper, more controlled. Gone are the sprawling set pieces and frenetic edits that once defined his style. In their place is precision, a focus on tension, character, and economy of movement. Bay hasn't abandoned his kinetic energy, he's refined it. This evolution isn't just a stylistic shift, it's maturation. A filmmaker who once relied on pure sensation now uses those tools with intention, and that's what makes his return to Transformers so exciting and potentially revolutionary, because Bay now has the tools to marry his maximalist spectacle with a tighter narrative grip. What if this new Bay directs Transformers with the subtlety and precision of Ambulance, but retains the mythic scale and emotional stakes of the original films? The result could be a blockbuster unlike anything we've seen before, a film that satisfies both the spectacle hungry and the story starved, one that reclaims the franchise's chaotic heartbeat while finally giving it a refined pulse. Bay's Transformers comeback might not just be a return to form, it could be the emergence of an entirely new form. When Michael Bay released Ambulance in 2022, it was a film that, at least on the surface, looked like another high-speed action ride. But for those paying attention, it was clearly something more. It was a pivot, a refinement. Bay took everything he'd learned from over a decade of orchestrating billion-dollar chaos and distilled it into something leaner, tighter, and more controlled, but still unmistakably his. And in doing so, he did something no one expected. He changed how Hollywood shoots action. Before Ambulance, drone shots in big studio films were uninspired. Aerial gimmicks, floating and detached. They were basically helicopter shots with less texture and character. They were used for scale, not storytelling. But then Michael Bay got his hands on drones, and he redefined what they could do. He understood that drones weren't just cheaper aerials, they were new tools, fast, hyperkinetic, fluid, capable of traveling places no Steadicam, crane, or dolly ever could. In Michael Bay's hands, drones became more than spectacle. They became an entirely new cinematic language, a way to express urgency, spatial geography, and emotional rhythm in real time. And here's the thing, once again, no one gave him credit for it. The critics didn't care, the award shows overlooked it, but Hollywood took notice once again. Look at action films post Ambulance. Everyone is trying to mimic those kinetic, gravity-defying drone shots, but Bay was first, and Bay did it better. We talk a lot about directors who changed the language of cinema, such as Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, and Christopher Nolan. But when it comes to Michael Bay, this man changed the grammar of motion. He pushed visual storytelling forward more than most directors have in the last 20 years. Whether critics want to admit it or not, Bay is a net positive for cinema. He is a filmmaker who doesn't just follow trends, he builds the camera, burns the rule book, and invents something new. Now imagine this evolution, this more mature, more technically daring Michael Bay returning to the world of Transformers, not just with better tools, but with a better sense of what to say. For years, Michael Bay's Transformers films were the punchline, not just ignored and dismissed, but vilified. Too noisy, too chaotic, too Bay. But time, as it often does, has shifted the conversation. Now, those same films are being reevaluated as maximalist cinema, as visual poetry, as pure, unfiltered, authorial vision. Critics and creators alike are beginning to admit what fans always knew. Bay's Transformers weren't hollow. They were operatic. They weren't incoherent. They were composed like visual symphonies, layered, textured, and overwhelming by design. And now, with Bay potentially returning, we're staring at a rare opportunity, not just to make another sequel, but to reclaim a legacy, to turn a once dismissed blockbuster series into something worthy of sitting alongside the great modern epics like Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, and the MCU, not because of shared universes or serialized storytelling, but because of vision. Because Bay, for all of his excess, had a vision, and it was uncompromising. He created a franchise that reached across the globe, that shaped a generation's relationship to scale, action, and cinematic mythology. For all of its flaws, Transformers has endured. Now, he has the chance to bring that vision full circle, to reshape public memory, to silence the critics, to make the Transformers saga not just commercially relevant, but culturally permanent. Because what we're witnessing isn't just the return of a director to a franchise, it is the franchise returning to him. Transformers wasn't just a hit, it redefined what cinematic scale looked like in the 2000s. It paved the way for Marvel's third act destruction, for Nolan's practical chaos, for the entire grammar of the modern blockbuster. Bay did it first, and in many ways, he did it better. The difference is he never tried to make it look easy. He lets the seams show. He pushed frames to their breaking point, and he made it feel like the movie might explode off the screen. But now Michael Bay has something he didn't have in 2007: clarity. In Ambulance, we see this leaner, sharper, more focused filmmaker. Bay had evolved, and he had something to say. So what happens when that version of Bay returns to the world that defined him? Maybe it's not about outdoing the old movies. Maybe it's about reframing them. Transformers was never supposed to be quiet. It was meant to be overwhelming, visceral, operatic. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we admit the truth. Transformers stands shoulder to shoulder with the great franchises. Not because it looks the same, but because it dared to be different. This isn't just a return, it's a reclamation.
Every legacy comes with a cost. And after the highs of Dark of the Moon, Transformers didn't evolve. It collapsed. Hollywood rarely gives us moments like this. A director returning to a franchise he helped build, not because of nostalgia or fan demand, but because the culture has finally caught up to him. The audience now understands what he was doing all along. Michael Bay doesn't need to make another Transformers movie. But if he does, he won't be picking up where he left off. He will be rewriting the story, giving closure to characters left behind, redefining a style that was once ridiculed into something undeniable. Every franchise, if it lasts long enough, faces the same question. What was this all for? Michael Bay's Transformers films were designed to move, to thrill, to overwhelm, to ignite something primal. And they did. Michael Bay has the opportunity to reclaim his voice, to finish what he started, to give closure to characters who never got it, to transform Transformers into what it was always meant to be. Mythic, emotional, and personal. It's not too late. The King has returned. Now it's up to us to listen. The original trilogy may be over, but its story might not be. If it ends where it all began, with Sam, Mikaela, and the roar of an engine, then maybe we'll finally be ready to admit that Bay never left. So now we wait to find out if Transformers, after all these years, has one final transformation left. Peace, plants. Namaste.
I am Optimus Prime, and I send this message so that our pasts will always be remembered. For in those memories, we live on.